Hi, good morning. Welcome to That Saturday Show, brought to you by the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice. I'm your host, Tom Dent. I'm also a volunteer and treasurer of the board at the center. The Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice strives to create a world where collective needs are met sustainably and nonviolently. We value the interconnectedness of all life. We emphasize cooperation and respect diversity. We're committed to nonviolent and conflict resolution, working for peace within ourselves, our community, and our world. Stop by 202 Harvard Southeast, check us out, become a volunteer, become a member, donate to keep our 40 years of great activist work going. Also check out some of our Pajola-associated activist groups like Veterans for Peace, the Bosque Center for Spiritual Living, the Transgender Resource Center, and Common Ground Rising. Speaking of Common Ground Rising, we're bringing Executive Director Elaine Cimino back for Zoom as part of our fourth part on air quality in Albuquerque. And she's going to discuss last week's City Air Quality Control Board meeting, the Clean Cars Act, and how we can move forward in the community and in the upcoming 60-day New Mexico legislative session. We also have Kathy Liden in the studio performing Lonely Canyon and One Line. And our first studio guest, it's good to be back in the studio, is James Janko with Veterans for Peace's Climate Crisis and Militarism Project. Here's some announcements. If you haven't voted yet, make a plan. Early voting is now open, as is absentee voting. If you want to get your absentee ballot, go to contact clerk@burnco.gov. The deadline for sending in absentee ballots is November 3rd, and the deadline for early voting is November the 5th. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November the 8th. Please vote for women's rights, vote for voting rights to be established nationally, vote to protect LGBTQ plus communities of color, and immigrants' rights. Vote to maintain freedom, democracy, and freedom of and from religion. Remember, Congress can codify Roe versus Wade and restore national voting rights, but it has no power over inflation or high gas prices. The Peace Center is planning our annual yard sale to take place on Saturday, November the 19th. Please call the center at 505-268-9557 for details if you want to drop off goods for the yard sale, or if you want to volunteer and help us. On November 6th, the center presents the Race Amity Conversations at 1 p.m. on cross-racial friendship throughout American and international history. Free food distribution takes place in our parking lot every Saturday at 9 p.m., and our Peace Cafe opens every Thursday from 10 until 3 p.m. with free food, music, coffee, and great conversation. With me today is James Janko, a member of the Albuquerque Center for the Albuquerque chapter for Veterans for Peace, and with the Climate Crisis and Militarism Project of National Veterans for Peace. He was an infantry medic in the Vietnam War in 1970. After his time in the war, he studied ecology at UC Berkeley and received a BS in conservation of natural resources. James is the author of 2 award-winning novels, and his new novel is called What We Don't Talk About. And it's forthcoming from the University of Wisconsin Press this November. James is hosting a launch event for his book at the Pew Center on November 1st, 7 p.m., and will be joined by Ellen Greenblatt. So please come out to the center and check out James's book and his presentation. Hi, James. How are you?
Good to be with you this morning, Tom. Yeah, I'm a member of this national project of Veterans for Peace, as well as the local chapter. And if you could give me the first slide, please. Yeah, the Climate Crisis and Militarism Project of Veterans for Peace, I want to highlight a couple of our goals. First, the U.S. military is a major contributor to the climate crisis, a fact often missing in climate conversations. So as veterans, we want to correct that, fill the gap. 2, the great bulk of our nation's wealth and resources is dedicated to the military in the name of national security. Well, the climate crisis is a clear and immediate threat to our security, and yet as a nation, we have a war agenda rather than a climate agenda. This can change. Previous slide, please. Okay, the U.S. military has the largest aircraft fleet in the world. 13,232 planes. The rest of the world combined has 15,004 aircraft. Russia, 4,143. China, 3,260. These are 2021 figures. Next slide, please. So the U.S. military is the largest institutional consumer of oil and emitter of CO2 on the planet. Featured here is the B-52 Stratofortress with its 8 engines. This plane burns through about 500 gallons of fuel per minute. So in an hour, a single hour, it will burn through as much fuel as the average driver in 7 years. So in the sea, on the ground, in the air, and beyond, our military is all over, and we have a new branch of the military, the Space Force. So it takes nearly 20 million gallons of fuel each day to supply the needs of the U.S. military. General David Petraeus, who had key leadership roles in both the Iraq War and the Afghan War, stated, "Energy is the lifeblood of our war-fighting capabilities." Hang on that again. Energy is the lifeblood of our war-fighting capabilities. So the lifeblood of war is fossil fuels, which is driving the climate crisis. Now, jets are the biggest users. For example, the B-2 bomber needs almost 4.3 gallons of fuel to go a single mile. The United Nations has 193 member countries. Now, if the U.S. military were categorized as a nation, it would rank 47th in carbon emissions. 47th among 193 nations. And this is mainly just looking at fuel usage. We don't know, for example, the emissions of our bases overseas. Next slide, please. So why are our emissions so high? The short answer to that is that we spend more on the military than the next 11 countries combined. These are 2022 figures. There are well-thought-out proposals to reduce military spending. For example, the Poor People's Campaign is calling for a reduction of $350 billion without risking our national security. The War Industry Resisters Network, this is another group that we are collaborating with. Next slide, please. So In the last 2 decades, the U.S. has spent $16 trillion on the war on terror since 9/11. I want to point out that $7.2 trillion, getting pretty close to half of this, went directly to military contractors. So the industry of war has a mission not only to perpetuate itself, but to increase profits year after year after year. If anyone has won the war on terror, it is the military contractors. Now, in doing this, all this military spending, we have militarized our domestic and international policies and failed to meet our most critical challenges. So a renewable power grid, 100%, what would it cost? About $4.5 trillion over a decade. So it's not as if the money hasn't been there. Other places where this money could have been spent, $200 billion, relatively small amount of $16 trillion, would pay for free preschool for 3- and 4-year-olds for 10 years and raise teachers' pay. $1.7 trillion would erase all student debt. Next slide, please. So this is a very busy chart here. Don't try to absorb all the detail. But if you look at the blue portion of the pie, you will see our priorities. Both major parties routinely approve the National Defense Authorization Act. This is the official mechanism to fund the military. And many expenses related to militarization are omitted. For example, nuclear weapons. You think that would be with military expenditures. It is not. You'd have to look to the Department of Energy for that. Also missing here are intelligence agencies, homeland security, border security. If you add up all of these other items, military spending in 2022 comes to about $1.25 trillion. And I want to emphasize that the Pentagon has never passed an audit. Okay, you can bring us back to Tom and me together here.
Well, one thing that should have been audited before 9/11, I don't know if it's a rumor or actually true, but we were told at one point that Donald Rumsfeld at the Pentagon had mislaid $2.3 trillion.
Oh, I didn't hear that, but it's, yeah.
Well,
Wonder where that went.
Really, some people joke that it paid for Dick Cheney's titanium heart to keep going. But anyway, so how do you know the figure on how many military bases there are around the world?
Yeah, right now, we've pulled out of Afghanistan, so there are 750 confirmed bases. I think there are more than that, but 750 are confirmed. Our project, we actually met with representatives of John Kerry's staff. He's the special envoy on climate. And we had members that met with him, and they were asked, what about keeping track of emissions overseas? And they said, well, that's the task of the home countries to keep track of those emissions. So we don't know those emissions, so, the figures that we have, 20 million gallons a day of fuel for the U.S. military, this is really a conservative estimate.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's really crazy. And who knows what the environmental damage it's doing to pull up that oil and frack that gas to power it.
Yes.
And jet fuels, and we've talked on this program before about the large jet fuel spill at Kirtland Air Force Base. You hear about Camp Lejeune, where I was stationed in Pensacola in the Navy. There's junkyards and toxic waste dumps and stuff like that. I mean, the overall environmental damage that our U.S. military does is really overwhelming. And I personally, I'm all for defending the country, but I think that we should cut back at least 60% of our overseas bases.
Yes. In fact, the Army itself has said that they have 1/3 more bases than they need. They call it excess basing capacity. They have a remarkable way of killing language with these phrases, excess basing capacity. And, so there's one place we could cut. don't give them more than they even want. Yeah.
Well, in terms of noise pollution, toxic
Yeah.
waste, who knows what else is out there? I mean, there's big communities that live around these bases internationally, and they're environmentally affected, and their health is definitely affected.
Yeah. And the military is one of our most trusted institutions. And if you ask somebody, do you support the troops? Almost everyone's going to say yes. Myself included, but I will qualify that. For example, the military is quietly preparing for wars caused by climate change. There will be...
Well, they had 5 different contingency plans at one point.
They have a lot of plans because they realize that there could be mass mobilizations of people.
Right.
And
migrations of people.
Yeah, and there would be wars over the most basic necessities: food, water, a habitable place to live. So they're quietly preparing for this kind of scenario. And so when I say I support the troops, I say, I want to stop these unnecessary wars. What if instead of preparing for wars caused by climate change, we address climate change?
Really?
We address it. And look at the contribution of the military in that crisis. Then, I feel I'm a combat veteran of an unnecessary war, so this is really close to my heart. I'm for the troops, and I want to keep them out of harm's way. And if we don't do anything about climate change, that would probably occur.
Yeah. And was it your battalion leader with an interesting name? Or?
Yeah, I had a remarkable assignment. I was I was drafted in the Vietnam War, which, by the way, the Vietnamese called the American War. And I was assigned to be a medic in an infantry battalion commanded by Colonel George Armstrong Custer III, 2nd of the 27th Battalion, 25th Infantry Division. Our nickname was the Wolfhounds, but I couldn't believe that.
Well, I was in the Navy. I was in training as an anti-submarine warfare operator, and in Pensacola, I picked up some kind of autoimmune disease from the toxicity of the Hurricane Frederick waste dump and stuff like that, and put me in the hospital 5 times and almost killed me 3 times. So there's that too. But
Yeah.
So you're reading and presenting and launching your book at the Peace Center on November 1st.
Yeah. Basically, I won't be having any books. I want to steer people to our independent stores. We have 3 good independent bookstores in Albuquerque, and that's where I'm hoping people will, pick up a copy. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that the climate project, the Climate Crisis and Militarism Project has achieved. One, we've done about 80 slide presentations. I mean, what you saw today was like a trailer, and usually they're 20 to 30 minutes. And, so we're collaborating with peace groups, environmental groups, etc. We have a campaign, Stop the War, Save the Climate, where some of us are getting arrested. And we feel like, veterans standing up for climate, that should get some attention. And I hope it gets more. And we have House Resolution 767, which is sponsored by Representative Barbara Lee of California. This calls on the military to keep track of all their greenhouse gas emissions at home and overseas.
How can people get in contact with you if they want to help out?
Yeah, you can go to climate@veteransforpeace.org. Climate@veteransforpeace.org. Veterans for Peace altogether, no spaces. So, yeah, climate@veteransforpeace.org, and we can steer you toward. We have a great website. You can actually schedule for a presentation on our website, and there's a wealth of information.
Well, thanks for being on the show, James, and have a good weekend. And we've got part 4 of our air quality in Albuquerque series coming up right now. Hi, and we're back with part 4 in our series of air quality in Albuquerque. Joining me again today is Elaine Cimino of Common Ground Rising. Good morning, Elaine.
Good morning, Tom.
And we were planning to have members of the American Lung Association on the show, but their schedule is really tight, and they promised to come back next week for part 5, I guess, of our series. So, Elaine, you've been following this stuff and the air quality board meeting that happened last week. Do you have any comments or reviews that you want to highlight about that meeting?
Yeah, what we did is Dr. Charles Gasparovic made his presentation, and it was very well received by the Air Board. And they agreed to explore the WHO AQI standards and see how they can integrate those standards into Albuquerque, along with the public health education that we asked for, the public alerts. And so we're going to start this long process now of seeing how we can bring this into um, uh, fruition and adopt these standards, and that's what we're moving to now. In May, so what happened at the Air Board is that a couple members after the presentation were talking amongst themselves, and they had a lot of questions as to how the more recent Clean Cars Act would factor into the transportation emissions in Albuquerque. And so that got, they wanted to know how those targets would be impacted over the whole thing, as if we're going to be drawing down emissions in Albuquerque. How are we going to do that, and what other things that are in place now that that the WHO AQI standard targets could benefit from, and what we can benefit from, because as we draw down emissions, we save lives. We save the health of the community through respiratory illnesses, cancers, stroke, heart attack, and premature death. And what we do to set those standards is to take these bad air days and figure out what the health impacts were for those days. And then that becomes a target. And then we set these targets to draw down these emissions. And so in May of 2022, this year, the Clean Car Act was adopted by the Environmental Improvement Board. And and so what we did was we set out to figure out what the greenhouse gas inventory and forecast was or is, and how what we have to do to draw down targets. And this is the targets of the state. This is going to impact what we do. So I'm going to share my screen right now to show you a brief report of from, let's see if that, or can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, let me, oh, darn it, there we go. Okay. And so the report that was associated with this Clean Cars Act was called the New Mexico Greenhouse Gas Inventory and Forecast Report. It was done by the state Colorado State University's New Energy Economy Institute. And in the first slide, we see the inversion layer and the smog that sits over Albuquerque. The second slide, and I'm going to do this very briefly. The second slide takes what this report was looking at. They took a statewide assessment of emissions, and they did a comparison between 2005 and 2018. And as you can see in those 13 years, the emissions climbed quite high. They were actually in 2005, 75.6 tons of CO2, and in 2018, it was 113.6 tons of CO2. Mostly, it comes from oil and gas. And transportation is a big factor, as well as electrical generation. And so the report goes into looking at the various sectors and subsectors that are contributing to our greenhouse gas emissions throughout the state. And as you can see, oil and gas is over half of the emissions in the state. Transportation is the gold area here. The blue is electrical generation, coal and natural gas. And now we want to make sure that we bring to this scenario renewables. And so how and in transportation, they did the zero emission vehicles and limited emission vehicles. And the second one here is the greenhouse gas emission, or the greenhouse gas emissions without oil and gas. And so if you take those sectors, you would see that the non-energy would be really agriculture is a big one, natural lands, industrial process waste, mining. Those are part of the non-energy sectors. And then buildings, electrical generation, and of course, transportation. And so they divided this up and tried to figure out where we are as far as to get a baseline. And the baseline is what we have now. And the reference that you see on here is what policies that are in place that may impact us if we do nothing else. And then mitigation is some of the things that we must do in order to meet the 230 standard. So Michelle Lujan Grissom signed an executive order saying that we need to make sure that we draw down emissions to a certain level by 2030. And so as you can see here in these references, that we have a lot of oil and gas in here. And if we do the hard mitigation and we bring on renewables, we bring down, and we're only then having to deal with natural gas after 230, and we could bring that down much faster. So here is the standard target that they were dealing with, and all of the numbers associated with how to get this mitigation. So we go from in 2000, and it's a little more now because we've had 2 years of rampant oil and gas production. We produced more oil and gas in the state than we ever have prior to 2018. And so that means there were more emissions, but that's not calculated in this. Neither is the idea of using hydrogen, because that will add more. And there are other factors that weren't considered. In other words, when they looked at oil and gas didn't provide them the numbers of what their emissions were for this report. So what they did is they took the production number of what was produced and they figured out what the estimated emissions were. So that's what this report is based on, estimated emissions. So what do we need to do? The mitigation that we need is that, and where we're at now, is that the ETA that was passed a couple of years ago is the majority source of emissions reduction in the state. So as you can see here, it really brings down the emissions just by closing the San Juan electrical generation, which just happened over the last couple weeks. So kudos for New Energy Economy of New Mexico, Mariel Nancy, and all the work that people were doing to try to get this closed and dealt with, because it really saved the lives of a lot of people who live around there. And it's really going to help making us get to a position of being able to draw down these emissions and meet our targets for 2030. But we need more.
Are there any other significant coal burning plants or coal burning going on in New Mexico, or is this basically it?
I'm not sure if the other there's 2 coal-fired plants. One was the Navajo coal station. I believe that was torn down, and I think this is the second one. I know that most of the electrical generation in the state is done now by natural gas and nuclear power. So 30% of that, and that will be going offline too shortly. So what do we need to do for mitigation? We need, and what are we looking at as the really stark mitigation that has to happen by 2030? And in just a few years, we need to put stack filters on point source emissions. We need to put filters on wood burning stoves. In Albuquerque, that is really what the most of our smog is from, is transportation and wood burning. And so we can do our part as citizens in Albuquerque by being more cognizant and realize what we're doing. Now, we're not going to stop driving our cars and we're not going to stop heating our homes, but mostly people heat their homes as a secondary source for wood burning. And so we need to kind of start looking at changing how our behavior.
I know that I just switched to a pellet stove inside my fireplace, and from what I'm seeing of customers or something like that, this is becoming a fairly popular trend. But they put this really intense filter on top of my chimney.
Yeah, and it's they have catalytic converters in some of these. They have really good filtering systems in pellet stoves. The problem with wood burning or pellet stove is as long as you have a really good flue system where smoke isn't coming into the house, then you're going to be the inside air is going to be good. So part of the issue of wood burning is it impacts health because the home is not healthy.
Mhm.
And so, but we're talking about AQI, we're talking about outdoor air here.
Mhm.
So, so here's the historical data. If we really look at greenhouse gases and how we have to draw down, is that we're looking at oil and gas must draw down 60%. They must have a 60% reduction by 2030. And this means that we need to start pushing renewable energy. We have to start being able to have subsidized heat pumps to allow homes to be heated very efficiently through heat pumps, and to start bringing on more incentives for renewable energy like community solar, home solar, and the sort. So this is
I'm sorry, I have a quick question about city solar. I know a few years ago, Pat Davis said something like, we're going to do a campaign to put solar panels on every city building. And I know other people are looking at it kind of like sarcastically, like, oh, well, the P&M rates are going to go so high that it's going to bankrupt the city, so they have to go solar anyway. What is the status about the city doing as much as they can to go solar?
I know that they've done a really good job of being able to transition many of their buildings over the past few years. I don't know what the ratio is now and where they're at. That would be a great follow-up
Right.
to talk to somebody in the city about what they're doing and if there's programs that will help. I know that HomeWise is offering incentive loans that are like grants that will help you transition your home, like for building efficiency in the homes. So that's a big deal in Albuquerque because many of these homes were built in the 40s and 50s, and they don't have the kind of um, uh, insulation that it really needs. So there's grants that will help if you're a homeowner. Um, New building codes have helped that efficiency standard, but part of what the city needs to also do, not only put solar, but to make sure that they have efficient buildings. And so that was one of the things. We have also in this report uh, that I mentioned prior that we're that there wasn't hydrogen that also produces methane for and other greenhouse gases included, and they did estimate the numbers of what oil and gas is actually doing. I think that the state right now is in the process of trying to figure that out. They're trying to put monitoring systems in. There's one monitoring system that the EPA has put out. It's called DART, but it's mostly fence line monitoring, which it just depends on which way the wind blows
Yeah.
as to whether or not it's going to pick up that monitor. So I think we're looking at mostly more like 90% drawdown for oil and gas. So here's the conclusion of the report. This was a long report. We can probably get people who did the report and are more familiar with these numbers who can explain it in more detail. But here's the bottom line. Oil and gas dominates the emission inventory, as well as transportation, heating our homes, and agriculture in the state. And if we can put some dents in that, we're going to be better off, and we're going to be saving lives in the meantime. The current policies are key towards decarbonization target economy-wise. And so if we are able to subsidize heat pumps for heating and cooling in this and take us off of the evaporative cooling, because that takes up water, it brings toxins into the home. I think everybody knows this year with all the wildfires that when you have a swamp cooler, you're smelling smoke all the time. And when you're smelling smoke, you're breathing particulate matter, PM10 and PM25. And we explained how that causes cancers, respiratory illnesses, and everything else. And when people are already are sensitive to emissions, this even deteriorates their health even more. Existing statewide policies now, while the ETA is good and we really need to push for those renewables, they're not sufficient. We really, in order to meet the 2030 goal, is that we need more action, and we really need to regulate the action. Policies change with the elections, and so we really need to figure out how we're going to meet these targets. And again, given the significant role, we really need aggressive action. And this was really, I think, when I looked at this and I saw that there were a lot of estimations going on and things left out, one thing I liked about this report is that it did admit to that. And it says that, you know, we have to take aggressive action in all sectors and not just pick on oil and gas, although 60%, over 60% of the emissions are oil and gas. And so the bottom line, my last slide here, is that the state needs to intensify the efforts. Albuquerque Air Board realizes this and that are going to be adopting the WHO AQI standards, and this will save lives and it will start drawing down emissions. And that's really good news for Albuquerque. It's going to take a lot to do this. They talked about putting alerts on the side of the highway to make people aware of what the emissions are that day. Maybe times of day to drive and not drive. Also, this year we had a horrific accident on I-25 in a sand and dust event. And there's all these fugitive emissions that are impacting us as climate change and these and the crisis of climate change hits us. And so having these alerts are going to be very important for us as we move forward to try to adapt to climate change and then start bringing down our standards. I'm a true believer in that we have democracy and we can change our local and how we can be more resilient with those around us in community. And I think we need to start here. And I believe that the state will adopt these things as we move forward, as we put forward a model that others can follow. I think we need to be leading and making the first steps. And I really have to say that I'm very proud of the Albuquerque Air Board for having that vision of knowing that this is a model, and that we're moving forward to something that truly needs to be done in Albuquerque.
So when you're talking about field monitoring, does the city have the power, or does it boil down to the EPA to be able to put monitors on point source or smokestacks, for instance?
I think that, you know, when we talked last week with Laurel Silva about all the impacts that the Mountain View community are facing. And really, it's really the I-25 corridor and I-40 corridor where industries are. And that needs to have smoke stack emissions monitoring. I think that the air board is going to have to figure out how that can happen. Industry will want to grandfather things in, but you can't keep allowing people to emit, that they have to do some mitigation. And because we're all in this, we're all breathing the air, and they don't have a right to poison us. And that is basically what it comes down to. And I think that it will really help the fight of the Mountain View community to be able to put regulations in that make sure that these stack emissions are.
Are you there?
We have to get to zero emissions. And that means they may have to think of other technology that they can use to do some of the same things in their business. This is what they do in business, is that they have to innovate. And now we have to innovate for adaptation.
Well, what can we do with, there's a little bit going wonky with the internet, but hopefully you can still hear me. What can we do to shift the balance? I mean, to really shift the balance, how can the community get involved? Is this all boil down to the New Mexico State Legislature and the governor to seriously knock down oil and gas production?
Well, one of the things that we've been trying to do since 2018 is pass a pause on fracking bill.
Right.
And we've had that bill out there, but it hasn't gained any traction. I mean, we can't get it through the Legislative Finance Committee. We've gone through the Judiciary Committee. We've gone through the Environmental Committee at the legislature. But there is such a hold of oil and gas on these legislators that they are going to have to see the light. And that light is that they're causing death, premature death. They're poisoning people by allowing this to happen, to keep these emissions high. And there are things that the oil and gas can do. And they need to get rid of their fugitive emissions, of all their pipeline leakage. They need to bring down, they could be doing a lot more than what they're doing. And then, of course, closing down wells that are abandoned or orphaned or not really producing as they should be. So we need to keep it in the ground. And there's things that oil and gas can be doing, but we also have to do our part too. And pause on fracking was to bring together all these stakeholders to come up with a plan of how to do that, and put a moratorium on all new leases. It wasn't stopping what they were doing now. They were just saying no more leases. They have enough leases to frack for another 10 years. And so we could have been doing this since 2018 and have a plan right now. But we were told that they would never pause fracking. They would never stop fracking. And bottom line, if they read the legislation, we knew that we needed a plan to do exactly what we're doing here with the WHO AQI. And so we're going to be a model to show that that how we can bring down emissions. And it's sooner or later these legislators are going to listen, because they'll have no choice. They'll be there. There's too much. How many forests need to burn? How many watersheds need to be destroyed? They don't know what to do with the people in Mora now that need help, because they've allowed this to go on for too long. And it's time that they pay attention to what people are saying. There are a lot of good people in this state who have been doing great work, and they're experts at how to do this efficiently and effectively, and how to build more resilient communities. And we need to bring these people together, and we need to start implementing their ideas.
Well, along with the People's Coalition for Rent Control and stuff like that, they really need to get sponsors and legislation going in Santa Fe, and I'm very interested in what the community and what we can do with sponsors and legislation to for air quality and for our environmental health in the state. But that's probably subject matter for another show. We are almost out of time. Do you have any closing remarks or?
Well, I want to thank you for allowing us this format to encourage public education and public health education to our community, and to bring forward the groups that are behind us. We have 12 groups here that are all environmental justice and supporters and allies of Indigenous communities, of Hispanic communities, who have been greatly impacted by this, by air pollution, and by oil and gas, and fossil fuels, and how we're living and destroying our lives. And they really want solutions. And we're a group about getting those solutions. So thank you.
Well, we need to try to share these videos far and wide, and you just gave me an idea, because Laura Dale does a lot with the public access education channel. Maybe we can swing some of these programs over to her.
That would be great. And we're going to be coming forward. I'm going to ask the Air Board if they would like to come on and talk about this. And different people in public health coming and talking about why drawing down emissions are really important, and what people can start doing. And really get our county commission and our city council on board and offering these subsidies. And that's where the state comes in. And that's how we do this, is bringing all of these folks together to come up with solutions. And so thank you very much. I really do appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Elaine.
Living up here in Lonely Canyon, the only neighbors pine and juniper trees. This cold wind is my only companion. Long ago, so wondering when you're coming back to me. You're living up here in Lonely Canyon, the only neighbors pine and juniper trees. This cold wind is my only companion. Long ago, so wondering when you're coming back to me. Yeah, the wind blows hard and the wind blows cold. You think I would have left here a long time ago. Well, should I stay or should I go? I hope one of these days my heart is gonna know. Thinking back then to the golden days when you were true to me and I was true to you. Stars in the sky shone in your eyes then. Magic touch would ease away my blues. Yeah, the wind blows hard and the wind blows cold. You think I would have left here a long time ago. Well, should I stay or should I go? I hope one of these days my heart is gonna know. time has passed and I think of the ways that you were always so good to me. Miss the fire of your warm embraces. Heart's not the same since the day you set me free. Yeah, the wind blows hard and the wind blows cold. You think I would have left here a long time ago. Well, should I stay or should I go? I hope that one of these days my heart is gonna know. So I've seen heartache and I've known pain. Clouds go by, love still here in me. I find my peace through the wind and the rain. I'll live through all of it, my heart will be free. Yeah, the wind blows hard and the wind blows cold. You think I would have left here a long time ago. Well, should I stay or should I go? I hope that one of these days my heart is gonna know. Still living up here in Lonely Canyon, the only neighbors finding juniper trees. This cold wind is my only companion. Long ago stopped wondering when you're coming back to me. Up here in Lonely Canyon, the only neighbors finding juniper trees. This cold wind is my only companion. Long ago stopped wondering when you're coming back to me. Yeah, the wind blows hard and the wind blows cold. You think I would have left here a long time ago. But the more I stay, the more I know that there's something about this place that takes the chill out of my soul. Yeah, the wind blows hard and the wind blows cold. You think I would have left here a long time ago. But the more I stay, the more I know that there's something about this place that takes the chill out of my soul. Yeah, there's something about this place that takes the chill out of my soul. You take my hand and we walk along the shores of ancient seas that I have known before. Glistening lights on deep waters that captivated you. I see them now clearly, they sparkle anew. My dear sweet Anna, you live within my heart, and all those before you were never far apart. I know your heart as you surely know mine. Your path is my path, our lives entwined. How sweet are the times I have remembered, those days long ago may last forever. One line, many pass into the mystery. One line, many pass back to my home. In dark northern forests where light is barely seen, the road rises steeply, comes out beyond the trees, and in high mountain meadows with scent of evergreen, we travel together on a winding journey. Though distant the time and the place where you were born, the dreams that you've had, I know they carry on. I see the light in your eyes as I'm searching for my way. Your spirit is here, living on every day. How sweet are the times to be remembered. A silent thread binds us all together. One line, many pass into the mystery. One line, many paths back to my home. You take my hand and we walk along the shores of ancient seas that I have known before, glistening lights on deep waters that captivated you. I see them now clearly, they sparkle anew. My dear sweet Anna, you live within my heart, and all those before you were never far apart. I know your heart as you surely know mine. Your path is my path, our lives entwined. How sweet are the times to be remembered. A silent thread binds us all together. One line, many paths into the mystery. One line, many paths back to my home.